Um, so just to reflect over what we've learned in the course, right? In the first week, we learned that we can train our attention to something that's happening in the present moment. We started with our breath, and that was a way to anchor us here so that we weren't constantly, it's not that attention wasn't present, it's that our attention at the time was most likely, for most of us, caught up in the thinking mind, right? What I either did and how I regret what I just did or did, many years ago, or what I'm gonna do. So we plan a lot, we judge a lot of what happened. So most of the time our attention is with the thinking mind, at least in this culture. And so we started the practice of learning how to come present and getting our attention anchored to what's happening in this moment through the breath. Because it was something that was alive, that was shifting and changing, that was always with us, and that was effortless, right? We didn't have to create the breath. It's something that just happens naturally. So that started our journey. And then we moved into kind of re-embodying our body, right? Because it was one of the things that I reflected on this last week because we worked on thoughts is, I don't know if you remember the last time that I mentioned that when I was younger and the abuses that were happening in my childhood were happening, I would go into the thinking mind because I couldn't feel in my body. It took me out of my body where the pain and the suffering and not the disconnect. There was I knew what was going on and I knew it wasn't okay, but I couldn't get that validation from the people that were taking care of me, right? So I had to ignore the truth that my body was telling me in my childhood. And I could easily do that when I went up into my thinking mind. And so this last week, what I remembered was when I sit for long periods of time and the discomfort comes, right? What I'll notice is that my mind will be busy, and all of a sudden I'll wake up from that, right? I'll notice, there's a lot of thinking going on here. And sure enough, if I turn my attention back into my body, I will feel discomfort in my body. So the habit for me was to, when there was pain and suffering in the body, was to go into the thinking mind. And if you start thinking a lot, you don't have to feel it. So this idea, so we started with anchoring our attention in the moment, then we regrounded our attention back into our body, because most of us are living up in the thinking mind, right? So then we turned our practice into this embodiment so that we could be here in our lives in the moment as it's happening. And then making that reconnection, because the body is an indicator. I mean, this is, as you may have noticed, that so much aliveness and so much communication is going on in the body itself. And we can use that, we need to use that as a reference point to making good decisions and good choices in our lives. So then the other thing, of course, is that it's the only place that we can experience our lives. So if we want to experience joy, if we want to experience happiness, which anybody not want to do that, right? Everybody, that's a common thing. We have to be present to be able to have that experience. So the mindfulness practice, anchored our attention to the now, helped us to re-embody it, and then we learned about our reactivity, right? So in week 3, we started learning about pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral experiences and how those showed up in the body. And then we got to notice our reaction to it, right? We're usually grasping and running towards the things that are pleasant. I want more for me, more chocolate, more sugar, more whatever that is, the good. And then we don't want the unpleasant ones. So after we steadied our attention, we learned to be less reactive to what it was we were experiencing, in the sense of not needing to run towards and grasp or push away, but to just hold space with it. Oh, here's pleasantness. And it's not that we were trying to ignore it, and not that we were trying to dissociate from it. Quite the opposite. We were trying to embody it more fully and be less reactive to it so that we could actually be in more choice. What do I want to do about the fact that this chocolate tastes so incredibly good? You know, do I want to keep eating it, or do I want to savor it? Do I want to enjoy this experience of pleasure, right? So we worked with pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral so that we could be less reactive. Then, so in that week, we learned that mindfulness grows this pause, right? Mindfulness gives us this space where we can have a little bit more flexibility in choosing. So that was week 3. So then week 4, our attention gets steadied. We learn, less reactivity, and we opened up to the kind of the bigger areas of life. And the first was the emotional life, right? Learning to be able to be present, fully present with our emotions, regardless of what they bring, right? The pleasant, the unpleasant, or the neutral emotions. So we explored, we went directly into experiencing that. It's like we started with this small circle, and then we kept expanding our awareness to include more and more of our experience. We started with the simple, we moved into the more complex. And then by week 5, we moved into our thoughts. And we needed to kind of gain that steadiness of attention to be able to sit with these bigger things, because these are the things that own us or can own us. These are the things that can most likely own us, meaning that we're living in reactivity to our emotions, to our thoughts, right? And if we're not able to sit with them, they own us. They're running the show. They're making the decisions. We're in reactivity to all of that. So the 5th week, we worked with our thoughts, and then we also learned how to diminish self-judgment, right? We learned about the inner critic and the techniques of this inner voice that is right here on our shoulder, follows us around day and night, and learned how to maybe not take that inner voice so seriously. We learned to question our thoughts. Are they true, for one thing? And whose opinion is this anyway? And is it an opinion that I want to carry along with me all the time? Or is it an opinion I'm ready to drop because it doesn't serve me anymore to beat myself up? So that's kind of the path that we took. The other thing that we worked with is, and this is actually the natural extension of what we're going to work with today, which is learning how to be present with the whole gamut of our experience as it's happening. So today we'll kind of put everything together and we'll work with it all. The breath, the sounds, the sensations, the emotions, the thoughts, all of that. The inner critic. Then we'll also begin to nurture, to grow the nurturing intention. Because we've kind of looked at, we may have experienced with the inner critic that that's not necessarily a nurturing attention to our lives, right? But we can grow nurturing attention and nurturing guidance, right? So we're going to learn a little bit about that today. We're going to, do the whole complete. This is what we're experiencing in the moment, and we can grow through intention to build the things that actually nurture us and honor us and bring us kindness and love. So that's kind of a full circle of where we've been. Do you remember any of that? Does that feel like, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of putting it all together? Does that kind of wrap it up? Okay, good.